Hello, I'm Stephen Tharp, and I'm here with a little primer on how to listen to acoustical and early electrical recordings, old 78s, as we call them, old recordings, specifically of opera singers in this case, but the general principles apply. And I'm going to start by telling you just a little bit about um, the techniques of acoustical recording as they obtained between 1890, the dawn of recorded sound, and 1925. Now, to make a sound recording prior to 1925, musicians performed in front of a flared metal horn, rather like the horn you see on old phonographs, which gathered and funneled sound waves toward a thin diaphragm at the small end of the horn. The energy of the sound waves caused the diaphragm to vibrate, and the vibrating diaphragm then caused an attached stylus to etch sound waves onto a blank wax rotating cylinder or a disc, a record. There were no electronic tone controls, and all adjustments to the sound were made by altering the performer's position relative to the horn or by trying horns of different sizes or diaphragms of varied thickness. All that changed in 1925 when the microphone was invented and recording became electrical. The electrical microphone could gather sound over a much greater frequency range and much more accurately. So the sound became much more lifelike. I can demonstrate this for you because it happens that we have two recordings of the final scene of Aida, sung by the same artists, Rosa Poncel, soprano, and Giovanni Martinelli, tenor. They first recorded it in 1924 and then again in 1926, 2 years later. We'll begin with the 1924 recording, the acoustically recorded. They sang to the horn and had to watch out for each other and place themselves directly in front of the horn when it was their solo time. So this was quite an involved and to us would seem like a rather comical process. But I'm going to share with you the beginning of uh, the recording of the final scene of Aida. Giovanni Martinelli sings first. Listen to the general acoustic, how muffled the orchestra sounds. His voice sounds a bit muffled itself. It doesn't have a lot of overtones. And then I'm going to skip forward and play a little of Rosa Poncel's O Terra Dio, where she gets the big tune near the end of the duet. So listen to these two brief excerpts from the final scene of Aida. Now skipping forward. So that was the acoustical recording. Now I'm going to play from the electronic recording from just 2 years later, and you're going to hear a big difference in the presence of the sound. The orchestra sounds much more like real instruments, and Giovanni Martinelli's voice is going to sound much more lively and closer to you, even a little bit louder. And I'm going to try to adjust the volume down uh, to make no, to not have it an unfair advantage for the later recording because it's recorded at a higher level. But we'll hear immediately the difference, and I'll play the same two excerpts again. This starts just a few bars before the other one and has a little more of an orchestral introduction, but you will hear the same music. And now I'm actually going to go forward to where they sing in duet. I'll just find it here. And this is the big tunes as sung by both of them at the end of the scene. So, a much better representation of the voices, much more lifelike, but still not what we would expect from a modern recording, a modern digital recording, or even a very good analog, what we had in the 70s and 80s. Um, Luckily, we have a recording from a bit later of Rosa Poncel. This comes from her retirement, and she sang very well into her actual retirement. And this comes from the mid 50s, and it's a recording of Isolde's Liebestod from the opera Tristan und Isolde by Wagner, a role she never sang on the stage. But I'm going to play a bit of this, and let you hear what she sounds like in a much more modern recording. This is from a LP disc, so there are cracks and pops that you'll hear, but you'll hear a much more immediate capturing of the voice. So you've heard already three generations of types of sound: early acoustic recordings, very early electrical recordings, and mid century analog sound recording. In this case, it was direct to disc, but it could have been also on a tape. Um, Now, of course, we have digital recording, which is a completely different method of capturing sound, and in many ways the most accurate of them. Although people argue back and forth about the warmth of analog sound versus the supposed coldness of digital. That's another topic. Why then listen to these recordings is the next question that comes up. Well, because the history of singing has not necessarily been kind to later singers. There are things that the singers can do on these early recordings that are rarely done nowadays. Miracles of legato, miracles of expressive singing and coloratura singing, and that's why we listen to these recordings. So, in comparing backwards the three versions of Rosa Ponzel, we can infer what she sounded like even in the early acoustical recordings by comparison to the later ones. Now, we don't always have recordings of the acoustical singers later in life recorded in the 1950s. Many of them were dead by then. But we can compare types of voices and know that no sopranos didn't sound like they had no vibrato on their high notes in the age of acoustical recordings. That is an artifact of the recording. We come to hear through the medium and hear what the voices are actually doing. That's a brief primer on acoustical electronic recording and just a hint of why we listen as well. Thanks very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this brief explication of the ins and outs of acoustical recording and electrical recording. Thank you.